Okay, Shavua Tov. This morning we're going to do what is the most popular psalm. As a matter of fact, for in many surveys done historically, for many times, this is the most popular poem in the world. And a lot of the credit for this poem being so popular goes not only to David HaMelech, but some of the credit actually goes to King James. The Christians have really picked up very powerfully on this particular poem, and definitely in English-speaking rite services, this is the most popular psalm used even today in their services. It was more popular going back to when I was growing up. And many of you are going to identify with what I'm going to tell you now. When I was growing up, we used to start the school day. I went to public school in Greater Boston, and we used to start the school day with a psalm. And more often than not, it seemed like the psalm was the 23rd psalm. It's short and to the point, and it is very powerful. And so just about everybody knew this psalm by heart. And I want you to know, recently, a lot of Orthodox rabbis still continue to use this psalm at funerals, and they use the Art Scroll translation. And I don't like it. There's nothing wrong with the Art Scroll translation, but I don't like it because I grew up, with the King James. And I was just so used to it, and it's truly beautiful. And so the popularity of it, when in America, schools used to recite prayers, which till 61, I think. I think it was until 61. I don't know how many of you remember when this happened. I was in like the 6th or 7th grade, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. So for a couple of years, they had a moment of silence, and then after that, they just went on and forgot about it, whatever. But it was. But anyways, so everybody knew, and not only that, my parents loved Pericomo, and Pericomo had sang a version of this. That was, I can't remember how to sing it, and my parents loved Pericomo, not Lawrence Welk. They didn't like Lawrence Welk, but this poem is very powerful and very strong. The fact of the matter is that this short poem historically was not an important part. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. Was not an important part of Jewish liturgy until the 1500s. And it's only in the last 150, maybe 200 years that you see this poem as something that's recited either at, thank you, maybe just put them in the back. That'd be great. Thank you so much. That you see this poem is part of the ceremony at a funeral. Here in Eretz Yisrael, it's not de rigueur. In the United States, you always, 99% of the time, you're going to hear somebody read the 23rd Psalm. But it really historically was not part of our funeral service. And the psalm that was the traditional part of the funeral services, it was the second psalm we did way back in November. That was Psalm 91, Yoshe B'Seiter Elyon. That was the prayer for funerals. But we'll see why this became a funeral psalm in just a couple of minutes. But the other thing we're going to see is when in the 1500s this became a popular psalm for Jewish liturgy, for Jewish ceremonies. Does anyone guess what ceremony it started with? Today we think of it as Shabbat and Sudah Shlishit especially, right? I grew up with terrible versions of how to sing this psalm in my local synagogue is Mizmor LeDavid, Mizmor, We had terrible versions of the song. But the first thing this was related to was Birchat HaMazon. And some people said it before the meal. There was actually a minhag to recite this psalm after Netilat Yadayim and before Hamotzi. And there were some people that would say it toward the end. You do that, actually. The minhag of the Gra is against that. But no. It's an ancient... I know. No, it's an ancient custom and nothing wrong with it. Do you know why? Because the psalm has 57 words that has nothing to do with Heinz. The psalm has 57 words, and 57 is the gematria Zan. Zan, like Mazon, Hazan at the Olam. So it's about feeding. It's about food stuff. And there are 227 letters in the poem, which is the gematria bracha. So blessing on food. So that started sometime in the 1500s, that custom, and then the psalm became connected to Shabbat. And so, but to see why the psalm became connected to Shabbat and later becomes connected to funerals, to do that, you have to learn the poem. So we have to start the poem. And the poem usually is considered to be in two parts. I'm going to explain why in a minute. I think it's three. But the first two parts of the poem, the first four verses, have the great metaphor, which is Hashem Ro'i, the Lord is my shepherd. And this concept of Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as a shepherd is a powerful and famous one. And it not only extends to God, it extends to leadership as well. The great leaders of humanity are also referred to as shepherds. When you look at the Ushpizin, they're also shepherds. There's two different lists of shepherds in the Gemara. One is the Ushpizin, the other includes non-Jews, non-Jewish leaders. But the concept of a great leader is a shepherd. Why? What is so important about the way the shepherd, by the way, I'm saying shepherd, it could be a goat herd. There's a ro'et son. We normally say sheep because I think sheep are more popular than goats.
Sheep are known to follow.
Goats do too, by the way. They're more independent. They're a little bit more independent, but they follow. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. That's a very important thing. But what is the concept of a shepherd? A leader. Number one, a leader, and number two, I sound like George Bush here. Nobody gets left behind. That a real shepherd or goat herd is make sure that they don't lose even one of the flock. And so it's that concept of the shepherds, that duality of the leadership, as you said, but also the fact that you don't want to lose every member of the flock is important to you. It's those ideas that make the shepherd so powerful. So the Lord is my shepherd, and since the Lord is my shepherd, lo echsar. Since HaKadosh Baruch Hu is my shepherd, I don't lack anything. Because Hashem is Kol Yachol. God is omnipotent, and therefore make sure that everybody has everything that they need. I'm sorry. And therefore has everything that they need, and as a result of that, this line that the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall never want, never lack, never be deficient, is also in the Midrash compared to God giving the Jews man in the desert, which of course that's this week's parsha. The man begins here in this week's parsha of Beshalach. The Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. Okay. We stay with a very powerful shepherd analogy at the beginning here. Binot deshe yarbitzeni. Rovetz means to hunker down. Okay? What's my translation here? What does it have? Makes me lie down. Rovetz isn't the same thing as lie down. Rovetz is more when you fold your legs underneath you and I said hunkered. I'm not sure what the English word is. Crouch down, maybe. Yeah, is rovetz more than lying down. Is like, it's like this. Rovetz is you just sort of collapse down. Think of camel. Camels rovetz, right? They don't shochev. So that's the image here. I guess lambs too. Sheep also. They okay. So when Hakadosh Baruch Hu, when my perfect shepherd finds that it's time for me to crouch down, to settle in for the evening, it's binot deshe in wonderful grass. Na'eh is nice. Wow, zen na'eh. That's so cool. That's so nice. Okay, of course, we're used to a lush. That's the King James, right? And cause me to lie down in lush pastures. Oh, is it green? Is it green? Lush is a better translation because the word green doesn't actually appear here. Yeah. Grass meadows. Binos deshe. Okay, so really nice meadows that have deshe, grass. Okay. Yarbitzeni, that's where he causes us to sit down. Almei menuchot yinahaleni, and by still waters, by pleasant flowing streams, yinahaleni, that's where he leads me. Nehila, hanhala, right? Leadership, okay? So we've got that the shepherd finds a good place for them to spend the night. That's a combination of safe and secure and food. And when they get water, they don't go to water which is swift running and dangerous. Now, most of the shepherds in Eretz Yisrael were in what's called Sfar HaMidbar, which is the border of the desert, and those areas. You had to be careful by water sources, especially in the wintertime, because they could turn into these raging shidfonot, English word, flash floods. So that's like the image here, that there's a combination of lush and plentiful, but also safe. Okay, that's what you want from your leadership. Now, I got to be honest. I would have changed the order, personally. When I think of leadership, the number one job for leadership for me is safety. That what you want from whether you're president, your king, doesn't make a difference. Is that security? So that's number one. Security here is actually number two. Okay, and the first one is prosperity. But it's got both ideas, and both ideas are expressed in an agricultural and in the way of the sheep. Okay, and this is very much the analogy is God is the shepherd, we are the sheep. I think that changes in verse 3. God is still the shepherd. I don't think we're sheep anymore. Which is why I think Gimel starts a new thought process. Nafshi yeshovev. My soul is settled, is put at ease, at rest. Okay? Translation I have here from Dr. Alter. My life he brings back to me. I would have said more settled and whatever. Restoreth my soul. Okay? Yeah, that's a shin bet as opposed to shin bet hey. But okay. Yeah, those are different roots. This is from, even though it's got the double bet, it's really from the term shuva. Animals don't have nefesh. Animals have nefesh chaya, which means life force. But the term nefesh in Tanakh is only used for human beings. So what's beautiful about the transition into verse 3 is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still a shepherd, but we're now human beings. In other words, our relationship with Hashem goes beyond, it begins with the basic, provider and flock. But our relationship with God goes much, much beyond that. And Yancheni b'magle tzedek lema'an shemo. He gives me nachat. He brings me in a pleasant way in ma'agale tzedek. I'll explain that term in a minute, but we're just going to say paths of righteousness. Lema'an shemo, for God's sake. In other words, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu does stuff for dumb animals, or for very basic humans, or for very young humans who don't really get it, we feel like, oh, this is being done for me. But when we get a little bit mature, our relationship with God we understand there's a symbiosis going on, that Hashem does stuff for us, but we have a responsibility for the greater aggrandizement of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we have a role of Kiddush Hashem. So we do things Lema'an Shemo. And that's only here in verse Gimel. And look at the verbs. I underlined the verbs in line Bet and in line Gimel. In verse Bet, the verbs are very much what you do with animals. You make them rovets. You lead them, But in Gimel, they're very much more spiritual in terms of what you do with the soul. You shovev, yancheni, the idea of nachat. So we see the terminology is changing as well. So the metaphor has changed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is still our beloved guide and shepherd, but we are no longer sheep, we're human beings. We understand that there's a purpose in all of this. Now I want to talk about that term magle tzedek. Now normally we say paths of righteousness. Translation over here I have pathways of justice. What's the word ma'agal?
Circle.
A circle or a curve. These pathways are the best pathways for getting to the proper destination. I don't know how many of you drive out in Midbar Yehuda, but if you go on Route 1 beyond Malei Adumim, and you're getting out there into the desert, some beautiful stuff out there, but you can look on both sides of the roads, and you can see in the hills next to you are pathways, routes. These routes are made by goats and sheep. And they never go up and down the hills. They always go around the hills. Those footsteps that making those routes around all of those steep hills, those are ma'agale. Those are ma'agalim. In our case, we're calling them ma'agale tzedek. The shepherd uses those routes because that's the best way to get from point A to point B without losing any sheep because it's so steep, okay? But for us, it's the best way, not always the straight path. It's the best possible path, in which sometimes it's curved and sometimes it's roundabout, but we're on a path that's going to get us to tzedek. And it's sometimes to get to tzedek, you have to go in a ma'agal, not on a straight path. You can't always get there, the shortest path between 2 points in a straight line. Well, that doesn't always work for tzedek. It definitely doesn't work for sheep trying to survive the difficult terrain of the desert. And that image for us doesn't mean that much. But he's writing to people. He himself was a shepherd, King David. So he's writing in a way that makes a lot of sense, to the people historically reading this. But Baruch Hashem, we live in Eretz Yisrael. We can see what he's talking about by taking a very short tiyul. And that's a very powerful idea. Daled continues what we just started. And what we just started is we're no longer talking about sheep. We're now talking about sentient human beings. Gam ki elech begates al mavet. Even though I may be going through a deep valley of profound darkness, this does not mean shadow of death. Most commentaries, most literary commentaries believe that the word salmavet is really the word salmut. And it was just the pronunciation was changed for poetic reasons. Salmut means profound darkness. So this, although some people claim, especially with the English translations, that this is the reason why we read it at funerals and cemeteries, I disagree. And I'll tell you why we do, I think, in a minute. Because this word does not really mean valley of the shadow of death. It means a deep valley of profound darkness. Okay? And my translation over here is, though I walk in the veil of deep shadow. So he's really... okay. He says there is justification to some, even though it's even though the word is really salmut, which is a poetic word for darkness. So in other words, he brings down that it's an argument. Now, it can go either way, but it seems like most of the Hebrew philologists that love the language really say it means profound darkness rather than valley of death. But okay, shadow of death. But even though I'm going someplace really scary, lo irara, I'm not going to be afraid. Now, we now have the sheep expressing themselves. Sheep don't express themselves. So in other words, that's why I'm saying that here we're not talking about sheep anymore. We're talking about humans. And then comes the thing that's extremely important. Ki ata imadi. The sheep is now addressing Hashem because you're with me. Sheep don't say that. So in other words, we've shifted, even though in the first 4 verses, the metaphor remains that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was a shepherd, there's a major shift from 1 and 2 to 3 and 4. In 1 and 2, we're sheep. In 3 and 4, we're sentient human beings with our own ideas, our own ability to express ourselves. This is very important and very powerful. So even though the situations may sometimes be very difficult and extremely scary, I'm not afraid of Ra. Now, normally we translate I'm not afraid of Ra, meaning I'm not afraid of evil. Probably best translated is I'm not afraid of harm. I'm not afraid of Ra befalling me is probably the true meaning of this expression. I'm not afraid of this negatively impacting upon me. Why? Ki ata imadi. This idea, ki ata imadi, is much more like a parent-child than it is like a sheep shepherd. This sense of connection. It could be that what we're talking about here is different stages of human life and development. And we'll get back to that idea in a minute. And now we have to finish this. And here comes the first source of why there might be a Jewish poem for funerals. Shivtecha umishan techa, your shevet is a staff. A mishan is something to lean on. Lean on me. Mishan in modern Hebrew is some sort of cane or something. A mishan. I'm sorry? No. I know your rod and your staff. No. A shevet could be a rod, a staff. A mishan is something that you lean on. So in other words, it's like a cane. Yeah, it's like a cane. Hema yenachamuni. These items, and we're going to talk about these two items in just a minute, what the difference between them is, they give me comfort. What's one of the things that a mourner wants? Comfort. This is a reference to nichum, to nechama, nichum avelim, to comforting, to giving succor and support to someone who is in need, and that the needy for us is often the mourner. So this is a clear reference or support for why we might want to recite this at a funeral. Okay. What's the difference between a shevet and a mishan? Now, first of all, it's probably the same utensil, because we're talking about a shepherd, talking about a shepherd analogy here, okay? And in the shepherd analogy, most of the time shepherds aren't carrying two different sticks. It's like they got one, and it's a shepherd's crook, okay? I'm sorry?
You can grab the wayward sheep.
But this one stick can do more than one, right? Can do more than one job. One job could be the simple job, which isn't so pleasant. You can just hit that sheep, bang him, right? Get him back into line. And we know that's more of the rod type thing, spare the rod, spoil the child type thing. That's more of an, I don't want to say negative. Not that it's negative, but it's not pleasant. Okay, so the shevet part of it is power, and that's not so pleasant. However, the mishantecha part of it, that is pleasant, and that may be the curved part, like you said, that gently brings the sheep back, or it could be that that you give a human, you extend the stick to them, they can grab it and pull themselves up, so that we view the behavior towards us of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it is punishing in an instructive way, excuse me, or whether it is supportive and succoring, we find both of them. We find both of them to be nichum. We get a sense of support, comfort from both. This is almost like school children, which, school children love attention. If they can't get positive attention, they'll settle for negative attention, because what they don't want is to be ignored. Nobody wants to be ignored. And so there's a sort of similarity, in this. And quite often there are kids who act up. Baruch Hashem, when I taught in schools, I was always in relatively small classrooms. And, and I could give every kid attention. And Baruch Hashem, I never taught public school. But when you teach public school and you can have 30 kids in your class, It's like, it's very hard to give every kid attention. And so some kids who feel that they crave it are going to act up and are going to do things that are, so in other words, people want to feel that Hashem cares. It's like, as I was growing older, when I was a little kid, whenever I did anything wrong, my father was the one we were afraid of. Olav Shalom. And it's like when I got to be a teenager and I'd do something bad and I was afraid I was going to get yelled at or something. My father, Baruch Hashem, never, ever hit me. But he did yell at us. We were into verbal abuse in my family. But anyways, okay. But anyway, so what happened was I had broken something, a window in the garage playing basketball. And I was really, really worried that my dad was going to come home from work and, and see the broken window and really be upset. And it's like, so I'm waiting in the house. My dad comes in. He says, "Oh, hi, David." I said, "Dad, aren't you going to yell at me? Aren't you angry at me?" And he said, "Nah, we can fix it later. We'll go to the hardware store and." Now, he wanted me playing basketball. He wanted, and it's like you get to a certain age, and it's like, and it's like, and it put, when he did yell at me, more in perspective. He yelled at me. I mean, he wasn't a perfect dad, but generally he yelled at me because he felt I needed it. But I was getting to an age where the yelling wasn't going to be productive. So why bother? And so, in other words, the shiftach, even the bad stuff, even the stuff we perceive as bad at some point in the perspective of time and history, I find comfort in that because it's all love. It's all love. Now, everybody agrees that the metaphor changes. So I want to say it like this. The first two lines, okay, God is a shepherd, we are sheep. Second two lines, God is a shepherd ruler, and we are human servants, citizens, okay? Now you get to the third part. And when you get to the third part, it's a totally new metaphor. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan. Arrange for me a table. In the third part, God is the host and we are the guest. Now, this metaphor has a lot you can do with, and there are many, many, many commentaries who feel strongly that this is a reference to Olam Haba. To Olam Haba, to the world to come, to heaven. That heaven is about God hosting those of us who make it there. Neged sororoi, against, in sight of the bad guys who are the ones who are tsar, right? Give us tsarot, right? The bad guys, okay? That those were adversaries. Tsarai means really those who oppress me, those who constrict me, those who pressure me, okay? And this, what do I have here? In the face of my foes. I understand what in the face of my foes, you get the nice alliteration, but Tsarai aren't just foes. They tortured me. They gave me tsar, right? Okay? In other words, we're on the inside and the bad guys are on the outside. Okay? That's how we view, that's an initial view of heaven. Now, the next line is not all that, it's not all that appealing to me. I mean, the second half of Hey, I don't know. Dishanta b'shem and Roshi, you anointest my head with oil. Okay. Apparently this was a thing in the ancient world that you'd put oil on the head of guests. And No, it's apparently was a social thing. No, I hear what you're saying. And I would have thought, on my own, I would have thought that, but I was looking a number of commentaries and historians talk about this was a thing. Putting oil on your head and kosi rivaya, and my cup runneth over. That's, that of course is very, very beautiful. So we're talking about two kinds of wealth that are going on here. And the two kinds of wealth are very much the two kinds of wealth of Eretz Yisrael. The wealth of Eretz Yisrael historically was almost always olive oil and wine. And this is that reference. Now there were times when there were some other products that were very valuable here in Eretz Yisrael. During the Roman period, Israeli dates were very valuable. There's actually a war between Cleopatra and Herod over the dates of En-Gedi. But throughout the vast bulk of Jewish history, most of the wealth in Israel comes from oil and wine, and those are ways in which we worship Hashem in this world. We worship Hashem in this world with the oil in the menorah in the Beit HaMikdash, and we worship Hashem with the wine that's part of the libations on the altar. So one is the menorah and one is the altar, okay? So in other words, in this world, we serve Hashem with oil and wine. What's going to happen in Olam Haba? We'll be served. We'll get our oil and our wine back. And it's a very beautiful analogy when you look at it that way. That Hashem is now our host, that and will be providing all of these things for us that we in the Beit HaMikdash did our best to provide for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I think when you look, even though I don't like the oil on the head so much, I could live without that one. When my hair is oily,
But that was God.
Oh yeah.
Because on Yom Kippur.
Oh yeah, it was us to do. Oh yes. Oh you're so very right. Oh yeah. I can't help it. It just bothers me. It's like, take a shower. Get that oil out of your hair. But what can I? No. Of course you're right. But the image, it just bothers me. Okay. When I was in high school, there was the good group and the bad group, and the good group we were sort of clean cut, and the bad group, the greasers, and their hair was filled with okay. Then by the late 60s, we all had long hair anyways, so it didn't make any difference. Okay. I think there's another image that has become very important. I think this is also Shalashudis. That it's not just a reference to, starting in the 1500s, the 1600s, when this became what you sang, especially at Shalashudis and sometimes at all three meals. This was the image. We're sitting here in the glow of the end of Shabbat with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, okay? And the Goyim are out there, whatever. Remember, a lot of the places where these songs were being sung, especially Eastern Europe, okay? I mean, the relationship with the Goyim was terrible. And Shabbat was an island in the storm of really miserable lives. And so a lot of the more Hasidic interpreters, when they start talking about this in the late 17, early 1800s, this is Shalashudis, verse Hey. This is Shalashudis. And so now with the emphasis is more on Shabbat, and we're gonna come back to that point in just a minute. Okay, the Shabbat essence of this poem becomes very, very powerful, especially when we're sitting there with HaKadosh Baruch Hu at Sudah Shlishit. Okay, but nothing but Tov v'Chesed yirדפוני, only goodness and abundant kindness, chesed, really kindness, chases me, pursues me, kol yemei chayai, all the days of my life. Okay, and I understand even in this world, even all the days of this life, I have been really chased and pursued by good stuff. I didn't always recognize it because sometimes it was a shavit, right? I didn't always recognize that it was good for me, but in the fullness of time, I recognized that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was always doing what was best for me. V'shavti b'veit Hashem, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord, la'orech yamim, for the fullness of time. For the fullness of time. Okay, here's the big argument. What's the house of the Lord? And the house of the Lord, according to most of the more modern Jewish commentaries, I mean like Hasidic and Rabbinic, okay, is Olam Haba, is heaven, okay? However, when you see the way it was originally talked about like 1,000 years ago and earlier, yeah, it really is, but it meant the Beit HaMikdash. Apparently, the original concept that King David was talking about was he wanted, King David didn't get to build the Beit HaMikdash, and he was hoping to be wherever Beit Elokim, Beit Hashem would be. And he craved that ultimate reward for all of his services, which he never got in Olam Hazeh. We never got in this world. But he wants to dwell within the house of Hashem, and apparently the original meaning is the Beit HaMikdash. As time went on, it meant Olam Haba la'orech yamim. So now you look at the two parts of verse 6. In this life, or everything that happened, I view ultimately was to my benefit all the days of my life in this world. And now I'm craving to dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days, for eternity in heaven. And that again brings you back to the funeral. That brings you back to the funeral. So we see that there are